Hello everyone, it's Scott and we're back for day 5 of Duskmourn House of Horror spoiler season. We got a limited number of cards today, but some interesting ones that I think have some chance to have standard relevance in Duskmourn's standard season and beyond. But before we dive into those previews, remember to like and subscribe to get further content like this throughout Duskmourn House of Horror spoiler season. So let's dive in. So first we've got Unstoppable Slasher for 2 and a black mana. You get a Zombie Assassin. That's a 2/3 with Death Touch. And whenever Unstoppable Slasher deals combat damage to a player, they lose half their life rounded up. So very powerful ability on Unstoppable Slasher. So if you can find a way to get this to do combat damage, your opponent's going to lose half their life when that occurs. And it also is a recursive card because whenever Unstoppable Slasher dies, if it had no counters on it, return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control with 2 stun counters on it. So yes, you won't be able to use it immediately, but when it dies at the beginning, after 2 upkeeps, you're going to get rid of those counters. And the third one, then you'll be able to attack with it again. So I think this is a card that is very interesting for Standard because I can see this as a really powerful card in the sense that if you just get in one hit, they basically are going to lose half their life. So that means you're putting somebody down to 10 or less life just with one time getting through to do combat damage. I think that might make this good enough for Standard play. Certainly in other formats, it might see play there as well. And we do have cards like Aklazad's Bloodletter and a few other cards that do things that are going to cause the opponent's damage to, in essence, double or divide it by half. Grievous Wound is one of those cards from this set. So I think this is well positioned to be Standard relevant. How much of a player it is going to be in competitive Standard, that's where I think it's going to be up to us to kind of play with it a little bit and kind of figure that out. Next, we've got Silent Hall Creeper for 1 and a blue mana. You get an enchantment creature. That's a horror and is a 1/1. And Silent Hall Creeper can't be blocked. Whenever Silent Hall Creeper deals combat damage to a player, choose one that hasn't been chosen. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on Silent Hall Creeper. Draw a card. Silent Hall Creeper becomes a copy of another target creature you control. So probably that last ability you're going to do third, unless you've got something on the battlefield that's relevant. Probably going to put the counters on it first to make it a 3/3. So on turn 3, you attack for 1, and you put the 2 +1/+1 counters on it. Turn 4, you're going to attack with it. Again, you get through 3 damage. Now you're going to draw a card, and then on the third time through, that's when you're probably going to transform it into a target that's something else, and then you've gotten all the benefits out of the card at that point. The one thing that with this that is unique is you can only do these one time. You can't choose them over and over again, so you can't keep adding 2 +1/+1 counters to it turn after turn after turn. So because of that, I think this is Standard playable, and we already have a deck that this might fit in where we've got creatures that are unblockable and we want to be able to get those creatures through for damage. So I think this is going to be an interesting card in Standard to see if it finds a home somewhere in one of those kind of decks. Next, we've got our last Leyline of Mutation for 2 and 2 green mana. You get an enchantment, and if Leyline of Mutation is in your opening hand, you may begin the game with it on the battlefield, and you may pay a white, a blue, a black, a red, and a green mana rather than pay the mana cost for spells that you cast. So basically what this is doing is, assuming you've got the 5 different colors of mana, you can now cast larger spells or 7, 8 more mana and just pay the 5 mana for them. So is this Standard playable? I don't think so. Maybe older formats would have a place for this. Certainly this is, in my mind, a card that's designed for Commander, but I don't think it's really Standard relevant. Alright, those were our rares and mythics for the day, and let's get into some lower rarity stuff that has some standard relevance. So first we've got Emerge from the Cocoon for 4 and a white mana. You get a sorcery, and you get to return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and you gain 3 life. 5 mana for this ability is high in white, so I think this is not going to see standard play. Limited, I think it's an okay card to have. Next, we've got Orphans of the Wheat. For 1 and a white mana, you get a human. That's a 2/1. And whenever Orphans of the Wheat attacks, tap any number of untapped creatures you control. Orphans of the Wheat gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each creature tapped this way. So Orphans of the Wheat, I think, is our payoff card for all the survival abilities. Because remember, with the survival mechanic, the card has to be tapped at the beginning of your second main phase to get the benefit of it. Well, now you don't have to attack with any of those creatures. You can just tap them and give Orphan of the Wheats that +1/+1 for each of those cards that you're doing it. And now this becomes a pretty large creature that can probably attack through some stuff on your opponent's side, and you're going to get the added benefit of getting all of the triggers for survival when those cards are tapped at the beginning of your second main phase. So I think this is a card, if the survival mechanic does see play in standard, this is a card that's going to be a build around for that. Next, we've got Unsettling Twins for 3 and a white mana. You get a human, and it's a 2/2. And when Unsettling Twins enters, Manifest Dread. So you're getting, for 4 mana, you're getting 2 2/2s. It's a common, limited playable, but not beyond that. Pit Drowner for 1 and a blue mana. You get a Merfolk. That's a 2/1 with Flash and has Vigilance. And when Flood Pit Drowner enters, tap target creature an opponent controls and put a stun counter on it. And you can pay 1 and a blue mana and tap Flood Pit Drowner and shuffle Flood Pit Drowner and the target card with a stun counter on it into their owner's library. So as long as there's a stun counter on it, something on the opponent's side, you can go ahead and get that added ability of sending it to your opponent's graveyard. And I think that is certainly something that is playable in standard. And the way this is going to work is you're going to flash this in, tap down their best creature with a stun counter. You go to your turn. Now you've got Flood Pit Drowner's ability activated. You pay the 2 and you send their best card to their library, and that will be very powerful in standard, I think. So I think what we'll see is blue decks will want this that have to deal with powerful creature decks. So expect to see Flood Pit's Drowner definitely in standard as we move forward. And it's also a Merfolk. And we do have a Merfolk Lord from Dominaria United, and we haven't really gotten a lot of Merfolk support. But if we do get more Merfolk support over the next few sets, then this may have even more relevance in standard. Next, we've got Tunnel Surveyor for 2 and a blue mana. You get a Human Detective. That's a 2/2. And when Tunnel Surveyor enters, create a 1/1 white Glimmer enchantment creature token. So 2 creatures for 3 mana, 3 power on the field. Reasonable and limited. Probably not going to see any standard play. Next, we've got Dashing Bloodsucker for 3 and a black mana. You get a Vampire Warrior. That's a 2/5 with Eerie. And whenever an enchantment you control enters, and whenever you fully unlock a room, Dashing Bloodsucker gets +2 and gains lifelink until end of turn. So definitely another card that's designed to work with our rooms and the enchantment theme of this set. So because of that, it has some outside chance of seeing standard play. Certainly if you're building an enchantment or a room deck in limited, it's a good card for that because you're likely to get that activation pretty consistently. Next, we've got Popular Egotist for 2 and a black mana. You get a Human Rogue. That's a 3/2. And for 1 and a black mana, you can sacrifice another creature or enchantment, and Popular Egotist gains indestructible until end of turn, and you tap it. So if it's a target of an opponent's spell, you can protect it by sacrificing another creature or enchantment. And whenever you sacrifice a permanent, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So this is a card that I think is definitely standard playable. We've seen something very similar to this in white over the last 5 years or so. A couple times we've seen cards like this where you attack with them and you discard a card to protect it, or you sacrifice a creature to protect that creature. And those have seen moderate amounts of play in Standard, so I would think this is going to be one where we could see that as well, especially if there are other cards in your deck that would benefit from having an enchantment leave the battlefield or a creature dying on you, like the ability that Popular Egotist has, where opponent loses a life and you gain a life when you sacrifice a permanent. Next, we've got Commune with Evil for 2 and a black mana. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. Put one into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. You gain 3 life. So this is one of the best black card draw spells I've seen, where you're gaining life from it, which is normally not an ability that you would see in black. And you're also benefiting by getting to look at 4 cards and choose the one that makes the most sense given the board state. So I think this will see standard play in decks going forward because it's a very powerful card draw ability, and that extra buff in life can be very important in the mid to late game. Next, we've got Final Vengeance for 1 black mana. You get a sorcery and an additional cost to cast the spell, sacrifice a creature or enchantment, exile target creature. So 1 mana, exile a creature. Okay, again, you have to pay the cost of sacrificing an enchantment or sacrificing a creature, but in a lot of cases you've got a 1 or 2 cost creature you can do that with. So I think Final Vengeance certainly has some standard playability, and we're seeing things that are similar to this that cost 1 mana occasionally seeing standard play, so I wouldn't see why this one wouldn't either. Next, we've got Grab the Prize for 1 and a red mana. You get a sorcery, and it is additional cost to cast this spell, discard a card, draw 2 cards. If the discarded card wasn't a land card, Grab the Prize deals 2 damage to each opponent. So very interesting card. This is, a card that basically we get reprinted, it seems like every year or so, where you discard a card, you get to draw 2 cards in red, and this is the first time it's had an upside to it. So not only are you discarding that card, but then you get the upside of if you discard a non-land card, you get to do 2 damage to your opponent, and I think that may push this to standard playability. Next, we've got Irreverent Gremlin for 1 and a red mana. You get a gremlin with menace. That's a 2/2. And whenever another creature you control with power 2 or less enters the battlefield, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Do this only once each turn. So nice ability on Irreverent Gremlin. You're playing a deck that's got a lot of power creatures or less, and you use that ability regularly, just kind of filter through your deck. Now, because of the way current red decks are put together, I don't think this sees standard play at this point, but maybe down the road when we get rid of all the prowess creatures, and it's going to be a while for that. But once some of those prowess creatures go away, like Monastery Swiftspear, maybe it opens up an opportunity for a card like this to see some standard play. Next, we've got Anthropede for 3 and a green mana. You get an insect. That's a 3/4 with reach. And when Anthropede enters, you may discard a card or pay 2. When you do, destroy target room. So very powerful ability on a common here of that ability to destroy an enchantment, but specifically a room. And I think that in Limited will definitely be a card. If you get this, you want to play it because you want to be able to destroy the rooms that your opponent will be playing from this set, because they're most likely going to bring some benefit to them that will probably help their game plan. So this is, I think, a definite limited playable card and maybe one of the better commons in the set. Our last card of the day is Wary Watchdog for 1 and a green mana. You get a dog. It's a 3/1. And when Wary Watchdog enters or dies, you get to surveil 1. Limited card, 3/1. is a good stat line for it. But again, it pretty much dies to any removal and or any creature blocking it's going to kill it. And it doesn't have trample, so limited playable and nothing beyond that. Alright, those are our cards from Day 5 of Duskmourn House of Horror spoiler season. Thanks for staying to the end of the video. And I've put here for you my Day 4 and my Day 3 video for you to take a look at those so you can see what we got over the last couple days of Duskmourn House of Horror spoiler season. Thanks for staying to the end of the video, and I will see you in the next one.